You can see my little side cam now. And I was going to show you a few of the things that I have out. So for this is going to be for the texture board, the texture and brushwork. And I painted a couple of areas solid for some of the techniques I'll show you in just a minute. And because I wanted it to be dry when I got to it for you all. But you can see I just put a piece of masking tape down the center, and then I just kind of put half of it on the edge and then wrap the other half around so I'd have more space to work in. And then I just divided that into half and then the half, so I have like 8 little rectangles. Okay, so try to get that. That's for the texture and brushstroke one. And then for the blending one, it said you needed to have 5 rectangles. So we're going to be blending like up and down this short way. And so you can see I just put tape. I wrapped it about halfway around the back and did all 4 edges. And then I just, because it's the painter's tape, I just kind of tore 4 strips and then didn't stick them down, just kind of laid them out and moved them around until I got them all about equal, and then pushed them down. So I have 5 rows of the empty spaces, rectangles. I'm sorry, I'm still worrying about people that can't get into the class. Hopefully that resolves itself soon. And then over here, I'm kind of doing a no-no from what I usually tell you all, is mixing colors. I got this kit of probably 50 different tubes of paint, and it had a bunch of pre-mixed like different values. And I never really used those, so I was just going to use those for this to save a little bit of time. So I picked out 10 colors that are close to each other in value. And what I mean by that is you don't want to do this exercise with like white and black because they're so far from each other, they're not going to really want to blend. And so you're going to want to mix colors. Like I said, you'll probably want to mix them if you don't have some that are close to each other, and just like we did last week. So we have like different values already made, or leftover paint, you could use some of that. And you don't have to use the same colors on each row. You can kind of change it up however you want to. So I'm going to turn this in a way so you see everything, and then I'm going to squirt my paint out. And these are not the open paints. These are the a brand called Arteza that I got for a gift. So I'm going to put those out on this palette paper that finally came in the mail for me. And I was going to tell you all, if anyone's still missing stuff from their kits, some of my drawing students today were like, you know, I still don't have this, and I've been emailing the bookstore. And so if you don't have stuff, let me know. I like send me an email and tell me exactly what you're missing or what's going on. Because if you don't tell me, I don't know, because they're not reporting to us. So if I don't hear from you all about things, then I just assume you have the stuff. So I do need to know. So send me an email if you're missing anything. I would like to send just one email to the district saying, you know, these are the students that I have. These are what they're missing for each class, so that it's nice and you know, organized, and they're not getting multiple emails. Because I think that's part of it, is they're receiving so many emails, it's taking longer to respond. And I'm on the committee for yeah, please send me an email, because if I don't, I need it in an email so I can compile it all together, because it doesn't save the chat from these sessions. So I need it in an email. And if you will, just put your name, because some of your emails don't have your full name in them. Put your name, what class you're in, and then what the issue is, so that I can put that all together. Because I'm on the district committee, but if I don't know what's missing, then I can't really you know, do anything about it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squirt out these 10 different colors. And again, I would, for you all, I would mix, you know, these different colors, but these are, like I said, pre-mixed ones, and it will just help the demo go a little bit faster. But I kind of check these, and they're all sort of within the same value range or kind of a gradation already. And I really don't use a lot of these because I do like to mix my own colors normally. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to just try these out. And I kind of put them in order that they would blend nicer together, like if they're closer in temperature or value. Well, that's really not natural looking, but it's like a hot pink. We'll see what happens. So you can use whatever colors for this blending chart. I see more people are joining. That's good. I don't know what's going on with eCampus. I got an email that the issue was resolved, so since we already missed Monday, I was kind of scared to put off the class much further. Okay, so you can see with these colors, none of them are like the primary colors. These have all kind of been pre-mixed, and I don't normally buy all of these, so that's what I was saying to those of you just joining, is you may want to, you'll probably want to mix different colors, and I could probably do that too. I was just trying to save a little bit of time with the demo. Now, for these columns, we're going to do a technique of blending in each of the 5 columns. And again, I didn't measure any of this. If you need to, you totally can. I just did like half of the tape around all 4 edges, and then once I did that, then I laid 4 pieces of tape over and just kind of moved them until they were even, and then I put the tape down. This tape is pretty forgiving for that kind of stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to be using, this is about a 1-inch brush. It's a flat brush. Whenever you're wanting to lay down flat color, it's always best to use a flat brush. Okay, so if you use a curved brush or a pointed brush or a filbert, it's not going to want to lay down super flat. So the first technique of blending is what we call blocking in. And blocking in is where it's more kind of like camouflage. If you've ever seen, camouflage up close before, the colors aren't really blended together, but they're within kind of the same similar values or temperatures that they kind of blend together a little bit. And so some people paint more like that. If you like pop art, more Andy Warhol kind of looking stuff where everything has like a clean edge and nothing's really blended, this would be the technique to kind of use. And so some people do paint this way. Now, whenever I'm painting, I always like to dip my brush into water, and then I blot the excess off with a paper towel or a cloth just to make sure that the brush is kind of damp. I found that the paint, if it's dry, the paint will want to stay on the brush. But if it's too wet, it's going to dilute it, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to start with one color, and then I'm just going to block it in. Some of these colors may be more streaky than others, and this is I think a cheaper brand paint too. So what you want to do is put it on and try to get it as even as possible. I know whenever you see streaks in the paint, your instinct is to want to put it on thicker. But whenever the paint is already thick and you haven't thinned it down, the best thing to do is really just to keep it even. And then we have more of it left. So once that it dries, if we want it to not be streaky, we can put another coat. Some colors are just more naturally like that. Okay, so I'm going to then rinse my brush. And if you hear background sound, it sounds like it's starting to rain here, so I apologize for that. It has been a fun day with technology. My morning class, the camera didn't switch over whenever I was doing my demo, and nobody said anything, so I did this whole project for like an hour, and they couldn't see anything I was doing, and nobody said anything. So I'm going to have to re-record that one. And yeah, so it's been an interesting day, and then the eCampus outage and all the book and supply issues. Hopefully things get better soon. So you can see I'm just coming along and blocking in the color. And this is sort of what you all were doing. You know, I think I did for some of my color exercises. I was just kind of wanting to see what you all did, just putting those colors side by side. And I'll show you the ones I finished in just a moment from last week. So you can do this for all 10 colors. And it's okay if they touch a little bit. Yeah, so I know I mentioned that most colors you can make. However, like this hot pink, that's a pretty unnatural color. So there's some, pigments that you might actually have to purchase if you're wanting really extreme things that are kind of off the color wheel. So sometimes I just go back and forth if the paint wasn't really distributed on the brush evenly. And most of you have probably painted this way before, just blocking in colors, kind of like a paint by number. And I have multiple jars set up of water, so as one gets dirty, I have another one ready to go, because you do want to clean. So you can see, like with a lot of these colors, like especially these two, they're so similar. Whenever I get ready to blend, they're going to blend easier. And that's what I was talking about last week with the color exercises. The more that you mix them, the easier they're going to be to blend together. So I put 10 different colors out. I know this looks black probably to you all, but it's actually a dark gray called Payne's gray. It looks much more gray in person than on camera. And I have a few more spots, so I'll probably fill that in with other colors later. But I'm going to move on to the next technique, which is I call it the swooshing technique. And the swooshing is where you sort of blend them together, but with a smaller brush. So all of these are going to lead into the next step. Okay, so let me turn this a little bit. All right, so to do the swooshing, you want to put colors side by side. And this is where you want to have enough paint that you can actually do something, with it. If you put the paint on too thin, then you're not going to have any paint to really blend. So I don't know what's happening outside, but my dogs get a little weird with the rain. All right, so then you want to take a pointed brush, and it can be, a smaller one or a larger one, whatever size that you have. And then with the two bands of color that are close together, you're going to create like almost like a little zipper, pushing these two into each other, like just back and forth, like a little zigzag in between the two. So not going up and down, just back and forth. And that just kind of creates this blurred effect between the colors. And I don't really use this one, too often, but I have seen, it was bigger, I think, in like a lot of the 80s and 90s art that I've seen. All right, so then you lay down the next color, and you want to do this, you want to do it while they're all wet so they can continue to blend into each other. And you can probably do more than one, color at a time if you want. I would just be careful. I wouldn't do the whole row and then try to blend them because they'll probably dry. So now I have a few rows. So for this one, I can do the same thing. Just swish these in between each other. This one always makes me think of like tie-dyed stuff and like colorful, like kids kind of things. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next one. So that's the swooshing one. And from a distance, it will actually sort of blend, and it will look like that they're being blended together. So the next one we're going to do is what's called a rough blend. And I'm going to move on down to this other end of the cut. Well, now I'll keep it consistent. You can see my attention span running out. All right, so there's one color. So with this technique, what you want to do is take a pointed brush and you do the swooshing in between the two. And then I usually take a little bit smaller of a flat brush that's clean. And then you basically just put that, make sure it's dry, and you put it on that seam, and you just go up and down. And then that just kind of blends that seam out between those two colors. All right, so then we move on to the next one. Should probably move my water cups. And I'll put the next color. And I'm going to do a couple of rows, a couple of columns just to show you a little bit faster. So again, you're going to create kind of a zipper going back and forth between the two colors with a pointed brush. Then take a smaller flat brush and just go up and down, and that will blend them together. And we call it rough because it's still not super smooth, but it will, create a subtle connection between the two. So do the same thing here. and then blend that out. So this one to me is always really relaxing to do. Do another color. And I'm using all acrylic, and these are not even the open ones. So you can see like there's a misconception that acrylic just dries instantly and you can't blend, and that's just not true. So you can see those colors are slowly blending. So they're gradually getting more and more kind of blended. So the next one we're going to do is called the smooth blend, and it's like this, but even a step further. So I'm going to put down the same colors. And I'm just going to go for it and do several columns. I think it'll stay wet long enough. It's really humid in my house right now. And sometimes with this one, I'll actually use the smaller flat brush and create the zigzag in between this way. And then you want to make sure you don't flip the brush. But after you create the zigzag, then you can just go back and forth. And you want to kind of go a little bit into each color, but they'll blend into each other and you won't even see a seam or a line at all. So then I'm going to do it for the next two. Again, make sure the brush is clean. Don't flip it while you're doing it. Create that little zigzag, then go back and forth. And the same thing here. And so what's happening is these little bristles are slightly moving left and right, and as I go back and forth, and that's what's creating the blend. Now if I were to flip the brush around, it would put more of the orange onto the more yellow-orange side, and then that would mess it all up. So you want to make sure you don't flip the brush. And so you can see how flat and how evenly, I don't know how good my camera is, but I don't see any lines at all. And so that's one of the things about the smooth blend, is that it's just really nice and almost looks like the spectrum if you use a bunch of different colors, or like an even gradation, like it's been, blended together. All right, and then the last blending technique is, I'll answer those questions. I don't want to get off track of these, but I'll get to those questions in just a minute about the other charts. So for the last one, the loaded brush, I know not all of you may have like a big, huge brush. I can't remember what size, brushes came in your kit, but this is a big, I think it's a 3-inch brush, and you could see just a couple of passes of this would fill up this whole thing. And so this technique is called the loaded brush technique because you let the brush do the work for you. And one of my professors showed me this when I was in school. I was doing a painting of a bunch of pipes. Like, I don't know why I was painting pipes, but I was doing with a little tiny brush each different value I saw, like blending it really slow. And he was like, why don't you just put different color paint on the brush and then go like this and let it blend itself? And I was like, well, if you taught us these techniques, then we would know how to do them. He didn't really do demos, and so he just expected us to know a lot of these tricks. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to dampen this big brush. And if you have a smaller 2-inch or 1-inch brush, you could use a smaller brush. It doesn't have to be as gigantic as mine. But what you're going to do is take your palette knife, and then you're going to actually load the colors on the brush. So I'm going to put some of the green on the brush here. And then I'm going to take some of this kind of yellowish green brown color. It said deep yellow on the tube, but it looks kind of yellow ochre to me. Then I'm going to take some of the orange, put it next to that color. So I'm just putting right on the edge of the brush. And then some of this red orange. Alright, so you can see I've got all those colors loaded on the brush, and then I'm going to just put it onto the board, and you're just going to go up and down, up and down. It's going to look messy at first, but the more you do it, the more those colors are going to blend. And so all those big, all those bristles, there's like so many more in this big brush. I'm going to flip it around and just do it on this side, because you can get usually several, you can get quite a bit out of it because it has so much paint on it. But all those little bristles are just going back and forth and kind of blending it for us. This brush is really old that I'm using, so you may see some little specks in it. That's probably just dried paint I didn't get off from the last time I used it. But you can see, if you have to work really large, there's always a smarter way to do things, right? So this would be that way to do that. You can get quite a bit of blending out of doing this. So this is called the loaded brush technique. So you can see I got that full blended and the short. So for all of these, I want you to do the other techniques, but I wanted you to see that there's more than one way to blend. And so some cases you may want to make pieces that have a really smooth blend. Sometimes maybe you're doing a piece that's more expressionistic, where it could be more loosely swooshed together or a rough blend. And then sometimes maybe you're doing something that's more pop art or kind of paint by number looking, where you just block in the colors side by side. So I just wanted you all to get some experience kind of playing around with blending. So that's pretty much it. So I just need to carry these across the rest of the board, and then once it's dry, I would take the tape off and label them. Okay. So I saw there were some questions, I think, so I'm going to look at those really fast. Let's see. Yeah, so anything about your kits, just send me an email and put your whole name, your student ID if you have it handy, and then anything that you're missing, let me know, and then that way I can report it all together. So try to let me know by Friday if you what you haven't received, and then for the chroma exercise, it tells you on the sheet you can use, you can change the chroma by using the raw umber brown that came with it. You can really use any of the neutrals, any of the browns that came with the paint. And then you could also, though, try using the two complementary colors that the neutral. So there's two different methods. So you may want to go back and watch that little video again. That link, it should still be good for that video from that session. And then I can show you all I haven't finished all of them, but this was the monochromatic or the primary color one that I did. And then this was with the secondary color with the different values. So I created, I think it was 9 different values of green. And then this was my chroma one. So if you remember for my chroma one, I did 2 techniques where one, I just took the yellow and dulled it with the raw umber. But then I also showed how you can mix complements to create, to tone each other down with the chroma. And so I also did purple to yellow, showing how they make a neutral. And then I used all of those to create this one. And I'm probably going to go back and do some more stuff on top of these. And then this was one of the temperature, the temperature one, where I did yellow to blue, basically creating like the cool analogous side of the color wheel. And I was going to add some more things to this before I finished. Okay, so I think I was just missing the tertiary one, and then I think that was it. So as you finish those color ones, like I said, you can go ahead and submit those online if you wanted to. All right. And then for the texture and brushstroke one, you just need to take one of the drawing and one of the illustration or canvas boards or canvas and 11 by 14 or bigger, and I just made it into 8 equal rectangles. So I put a piece of tape down the middle, and then I did it around all 4 sides and wrapped like half of the tape around. So I had a smaller edge, so I had more surface to work with. And then I just divided this in half, and then half and half. So I really didn't measure anything. I just kind of did it, by eyeballing the distance between the spaces. So with this one, we're going to experiment with a few different things, and I'm going to talk about a lot of the mixing agents that you can add to your paint, and we'll be going over some of that. Okay, so there's lots of ways to create texture and different things with your paint, and sometimes though it can be really wasteful. And so one of the techniques that I wanted to talk about is working Impasto. And Impasto means using really thick applications of paint to where it almost looks like paste or putty that's applied to the canvas or the support that you're working on. And you may have heard that word before if you've taken art appreciation or design, because usually it's a word that's described people's work like Vincent van Gogh, who used really thick application of paint, Ansel Kiefer, who used really thick different materials on the surfaces of his work as well. And there's a lot of artists that work with really thick paint. Now, the only problem is that's a lot of paint that you waste. And you probably also know that some of the paint will actually kind of flatten out as it dries. So for acrylic, they have stuff called modeling paste, and this is the Michaels brand. You can get like a big jar of it and other brands too, but they have this stuff called modeling paste, and it is a structured medium, if you will, that it kind of looks like toothpaste. And do you see how much thicker it looks with me squirting it out than the paint? And it holds that shape. So if I left this pile of that modeling paste right there, it would dry just like that. And it also it is a little white looking, but it doesn't tint the paint too much. So I can then take a palette knife and I can add my paint to this. And you can see how it does tint it a little bit, but it's not super dramatic. I didn't have that much paint left on here, and you can see how it's really taking the color well. So now I could paint with this, and whenever I paint with it, it's going to look more like icing on a cake. It's going to stay really thick. And so that's a great thing that you can add to your paint instead of wasting so much of your paint, because you can get that tube of that modeling paste, the Artist Loft brand, is only like $2 or $3, and you can add a lot of it in just a little paint, and then you have you're not wasting your expensive colors. Okay, so I can add that to several different colors, if I wanted to. And I actually got my thing of palette knives now, so I'm not using just one. And so you can see it really thickens the paint up, and then it helps hold its structure. So that you can add it to the paint and then paint with it that way. Then another thing you can do is you can apply it directly to the surface without anything, and you can almost sculpt with it. So I'm going to, I feel like I need about 10 cameras to bring out everything that I want to. So on one of these little rectangles, I was going to just squirt some of this modeling paste on here. And I've done this for so many paintings, it's really kind of fun to do, where I kind of carve into it and then let it dry, and then I paint on top of it. And so you can create texture with the modeling paste. And this is just like an old paintbrush that fell apart, but I will find things to make tools. But I'm going to push this around and try to flatten it out. And I've probably got about 1/4 of an inch of this. I'm just spreading it around like icing. And I could leave it like this and let it dry, and it would dry just like this, and then I could paint on top of it doing what's called dry brushing, and it's going to pick up those ridges and stuff. And I'll show you on Monday, because all this will be dry by then, and I'll show you how to do some of that. So you can create almost, it looks like wall spackling, and you can use that wall spackling stuff, but I don't think it's as archival as some of the modeling paste. Now, this is maybe interesting to some of you to think, well, I can make something that looks like a fresco painting, but then they also make all kinds of hair combs, and these are some of the fun palette knives that I got. They have all different tips, and this one looks like a lizard or frog's leg. So they make all these things that make you have even more decisions and anxiety about what to do, because then you can take these and actually carve into the modeling paste or your paint and create different textures, and then leave that to dry, and then of course you can paint on top of that. This one you can see it's like really fine little teeth, almost like a saw blade. So that's going to create, you can create some cool texture with that and combine these things together. Thanks, Annette. I don't know this. I don't know if I want it to look like a lizard walked across my painting, but you can see you can just create some really cool textures. And sometimes like I'll carve out like one of my figures or something and like just do it really clean and perfect, and then I'll paint in different colors into those grooves and things. So you can get some really interesting looking textures with the modeling paste as well. Now the modeling paste is kind of gritty, so you want to just make sure you water everything down before you put it down your drains, because you don't want to clog your drains with paint. Now you can also paint with your palette knives. So I can take and start putting colors down, and that's part of what Van Gogh did. For some of his work, they believe he was painting with his palette knife versus a brush. So when you see Starry Night close and you see all of those ridges, do you see how it's creating that texture? So if you have more than one color that's really thick like this, and for oil paint, the medium is actually called Impasto for oil paint. It's a chemical in a tube you get, and it's literally called Impasto medium, and you add it to your paint just like the modeling paste for acrylic. So you can see you can create movement and direction. You can add other colors, but do you see how like this is the paint without the modeling paste, and it just looks so flat compared to the other one. I mean, you can mix it together if you want to, but to me, when it has the modeling paste in it, it just looks so much better. So those are super fun things to do with your palette knives and with the modeling paste. So I like to use that one quite a bit. Now there's another, you can go to Michael's and Hobby Lobby and Azel, and you're going to find, this is one called black lava texture gel. And it sounds like, oh my gosh, I've got to have this. What is this? Magic in a jar. But when you look at it, it's literally just acrylic medium, and it's got like little like plastic beads in it. And so it does look cool. So I'm not going to lie, it does end up looking cool. But they have a lot of these mixing aids or mediums that you can add to your paint, or you can put them over paint that's dry. I'll show you what that looks like too. But then when you work with this, it just gives it like a different gritty texture and gives you a different surface. So you may just experiment. You don't have to go buy, all of these things, but if you're wanting to create texture, when you work with painting one, you're going to have to all do a non-objective piece. And so when you don't have subject matter, like a person or a thing, texture and color, like they become the subject. And so having, visual interests, it really does kind of help, the piece out. So let me show you what a little bit looks like. So here I just painted this solid gray and it's already dry. And you can see when I put this black lava on it, it just kind of looks like I sprinkled pepper on the thing. So you can put it over, or you can mix it in to the paint. And these all look usually at the the art stores. You can see like they'll have samples, and they used to have like little pamphlets that you could kind of see what each of these little mixing agents does to the paint. But now a lot of it's on their website. So those videos and stuff that I was showing you all, those are great places to look for some of that. Another one that I will use from time to time is called Iridescent Medium. And some teachers may tell you to stay away from anything sparkly, but to me, I like a little sparkle from time to time. But this looks like acrylic medium, but it actually has a little shimmer to it. So you can see, I don't know how clear this will come through in your video or not, but you can brush this over a dry color, and it's actually going to dry clear, but it has just like a little kind of pearlesque luster to it, and it will be kind of shimmery. And it dries clear, but it leaves like this little super fine sparkle on the surface. You can also mix it with the paint. So let me take a little pink. So here I'm just gonna put some here. So now you can see this pink is got like a little shimmer to it. So those things are fun, you know, from time to time. I don't know if I would use them on everything, but you know, if you're doing something that needs a little shimmer, there you go. It's called iridescent medium. So again, you can put it over the whole piece, or you can mix it with your paint to just make the colors a little bit more shimmery. Now, the next thing I was going to show you is the medium. And you hear me use the term medium quite a bit. The medium, remember, we talked about binders. And so for acrylic, the binder is acrylic polymer, and that's liquid plastic. So all of the mediums, like this says gloss gel medium, this says matte medium, and here, come close, matte medium. They're basically the same thing, except this one's gloss, it's shiny, and then this one's not as shiny, okay? And then I have even more, like there's so many different versions of this, gloss gel medium, gloss matte medium, like I mean, they have like so many satin medium, like you're gonna see all these, and they're all basically the paint without the paint. And I prefer usually the matte medium because acrylic paint's already kind of shiny on its own, and if it's too glossy, it makes it really challenging to photograph without getting a glare. So I tend to use more matte products than I do the glossy stuff. But you may be wondering, well, why would I ever want to, you know, add this to my work? Well, for multiple reasons. One, it's what we use to collage with acrylic, and two, it's what we use to make a glaze. And a glaze is another word on that assignment sheet for you to learn. And so a glaze is a transparent layer of paint. And we use glazes to change the temperature. Sorry about that. I think my dogs heard me moving the paint and they think someone's breaking in the house. So this is what you use to make a glaze. So you can, the more of this that you add, it's going to look white, but it's going to dry clear. So you can make different glazes by adding your color to this. So I'm going to add some of this hot pink to some of the glaze. Let me see if I can separate it without getting it all everywhere. And whenever I was in college, and even still today, I have several Tupperware jars that I'll just make glazes of some of my favorite colors. Like I like to do a blue-black glaze, and then I like to have a red glaze and a yellow glaze. And what these are good for doing is sometimes you may be painting, like let's say a scene, and you're wanting things to kind of go back in the landscape. And so sometimes I won't have enough contrast between my colors, and so the subject matter, like let's say my main figure, is competing too much with the background and there's not enough separation. So I'll take that blue-black glaze, which is basically like a transparent film of blue and black, and I will paint that over the background but not the subject matter, and it will just kind of push everything back, but it doesn't, you don't lose any details. Okay, so here I painted this like this light blue, and so I wanted to show you, I just made this pink glaze. You can see it didn't change the color really at all, and now I can put this hot pink over this blue, and look what happens. It goes on nice and even, but what does that look like now? Purple, right? Like a kind of purple. So you can mix colors this way too, and this is how back with traditional oil paint, artists would work with glazes too, but they use more linseed oil to thin it instead of the acrylic medium, because linseed oil is the binder for oil paint. Okay, so it's a lot easier to do with acrylic because it dries faster, but you can mix multiple color different glazes. I'm running out of clean brushes and palette knives now. So let me just choose another color. Do this color. And I'm out of clean palette knives, so that's why I'm using my brush. I know I told y'all not to do that, but just pretend you don't see this. So now I can take this darker gray that I added the medium to, and now it's creating like this dark gray glaze. So you can see it still looks blue, but this just kind of set everything back. So glazing is a great way to create more definition or focus in your work without having to repaint everything. You can just put a glaze of one color on something and then another glaze on another. So like let's say you want to bring something forward, you can do a glaze of a warmer color, and if you want to send something back in the sense of depth, you can use a darker, cooler color on top of that. So glazing is quite a bit of fun. So I would like to see you try that somewhere in your on these charts. And I'll take some more of this gray glaze and just put it across this as well, and you can see it will kind of tone down. Some of this was still kind of wet, so it may actually mix with it. So experimentation with paint is, I think, just as important as mastering techniques, is just finding techniques and things that you like to use. And I don't use the same for everything, that I do, but sometimes I'm like, I haven't done this in a while. I'm gonna try doing that in one of my pieces. Now I mentioned collage. So collage, you can use the medium for collage as well. So I was going to show you how to do a little bit of that. I got so much collage material. Just a second. So underneath my desk at my computer and that I'm painting on, I have like a whole big container just filled with garbage of things that look cool that I might use someday. So if you have stuff like that, those are great collage materials. So I really like to do collage with painting. It's pretty fun. So to do collage with acrylic, you can take whatever material. This is like a kind of tissue paper. Now this I do have taped edges, so I have to be careful not to cover those up. Make this a little smaller. And you want to take the medium and always put some of the medium down on your painting first, because that's going to help it stick. So this is just the medium without anything. If it has color in it or it's a glaze, totally fine too. Then you want to take the material that you're collaging and put a coat of the medium on the back of it, because it's really just the paint without color. And then you can put that on top of your piece. And then I like to go over it with another coat of medium, because that kind of helps incorporate everything together. And whatever that material is, you've now trapped it into the paint, or the medium, which is the paint without color. So now you know that you can paint on top of it. And you can see some of the color from my brush kind of getting on it, which doesn't always bother me. I'm all about happy accidents, so unless I'm, if I was painting a portrait, I wouldn't want, obviously, this gray color to come through, but if it's just me collaging and kind of experimenting, it's kind of fun sometimes. So this is just, I don't know, it's probably some piece of watercolor paper that I didn't like, and I tore it up and thought I'll use it again someday. And today is that day. So same thing, I'm just going to add some more medium here. This is a thicker watercolor paper, so I want to make sure that I use plenty of medium on it. And sometimes thicker things, like, they'll maybe kind of pop up, so you may kind of put it down and then add another layer, but you'd be surprised what kind of fun stuff you can do. Tissue paper is really fun to collage with, because it's kind of becomes a little transparent whenever you work with it. So now I don't know, for some reason I want to add this color here. And so then you can paint over these things. You can do whatever you want, maybe a little impasto here. So have fun. These are really for you to experiment with. And sometimes when I've been teaching all day and I start playing like this, I kind of want to just forget that I'm teaching and just do this all day for the rest of the day. It gets kind of hard to stop. So so collage medium. Remember, matte medium, gloss gel. It's all basically the paint without the pigment in it. Okay. And then what else was I going to show you? Oh yeah. So pointillism. I know a lot of people want to know how to do kind of pointillist technique. So that's why I also painted this. When you do pointillism on like a white surface, the colors sometimes will look a lot darker, and it will kind of look unfinished because you can see the white of the canvas through it. So whenever I do pointillism or any like impressionist kind of looking brush strokes, I always like to put a color down first, just so that it's not the white canvas. So I'll put some blue here, and now I'm just going to come in and start putting some dots of color. And that's what the pointillists did. They would literally just do this all day, just putting dots of color. My brush isn't pointed, and you can create a gradation with the dots. But it takes a lot of patience to do this kind of pointillist stuff and make it look good and controlled. And I've done a lot of I used to do a lot of pointillism when I was younger and in college, and then I started working a lot larger, and I was like, I don't know what to do to, these tiny dots aren't looking the same on a big piece. So then I discovered bingo dabbers, and I found that those work really great for pointillism on really big pieces. So if you've never gone to a bingo hall before, there's a reason to visit, is to get some bingo dabbers to paint with. They come in all sorts of different colors. So really, to get the look like Seurat and some of the other post-impressionists, you really have to layer them together. Sometimes I use different brush sizes, and so I have a variety of different dots too. But you have to really just layer them. It takes forever because you don't want them to be touching each other unless it's going to be that way all throughout. Now, you can also use brushes to paint with the Impasto paint. So this was that paint that I added the modeling paste to. And you can see now when I paint with it, it's not going down flat. It's leaving this coarse texture. So if you want, again, more texture and more impressionist or post-impressionist sort of painterly techniques, you can use some of the modeling paste in with your paint. And it will look different than using the palette knife. So these are all just techniques to experiment with. And all of it, because it's all plastic based, you can mix it, it all pretty much mixes together. So this is what I could get lost in and do this stuff all day. So I want you to just experiment, trying different things, different techniques, and possibly things, if you have ideas for your paintings. Don't do little paintings. Just play around. Like, just keep it simple and kind of non-objective, and play around with some of these techniques, and experiment with processes that you may want to use in your paintings, so that when you get there, it's not an experiment with your actual piece. And then the last thing I think I'll show you, and then kind of wind it up and answer any other questions you have, is sometimes students want to know how to create different drips. And drips are a lot of fun, and you can use, show you. So I have gallons of like house paint in my studio too, because house paint is like an acrylic. It's a acrylic latex, which is very similar, and you can mix them together. Like, you can put them on the same canvas, but you don't want to mix them together like on a palette. You don't want to do that. So one of the cool things about house paint is that it's naturally stringy. Find something to open. I always get the lids dirty and then they're really hard to open. Now, always make sure that I only use the indoor house paint inside, because you don't want to use the extra stuff that could be really bad to breathe. And then you can use a brush, or sometimes I'll even use a stick, one of those stirring sticks that comes with the paint. But the house paint is naturally stringy, and so why not use it to do kind of drippy things like this. And the cool thing is it will dry just like this. And I've painted multiple murals, and I'm supposed to be painting one soon at Norfolk at some point if we ever get to go on campus again. But I'll be painting one on the G building. But so I use a lot of house paint. I have it in almost every color, and usually like some I've done for volunteer, so they let me like keep the paint, and so that I'll use it sometimes for the backgrounds of my larger paintings, just so I don't waste as much acrylic or oil paint. And I just don't mix them, together. But you can see how, like, that's what Jackson Pollock used. He used a lot of house paint, and it creates like these stringy kind of drips. Now later this semester, I'll show you all how to use watercolor, and I'll show you how to do some techniques with like fluid watercolor. But they also have fluid acrylics too. And so these fluid acrylics, they're not the same as the house paint. These are much more watery. And so you can like drip those down. They're kind of expensive. This is the Golden brand. I have a few of these. But these are kind of fun because you can add water to them and they'll kind of bleed. And actually I have my, what I usually do is I'll kind of spritz them with water, and then I just kind of let them bleed out naturally. And I'll put several different colors down and just kind of let them bleed like watercolor. But this is actually acrylic, but it's got chemicals added to it to make it look more like watercolor. And then it's going to be on there permanent, where watercolor, if it gets wet, it's going to run, but with acrylic, it's going to stay liquid. So I'll add some other colors. So I know, that's a lot. This is probably a lot of information. You may not be using all these things right away, but I just wanted you to see like there's so much more than just painting brush. Okay, so these are kind of fun. You can blend them together. They'll gradate eventually. If you just left it overnight, it would they would start blending into each other more naturally, and you can get some kind of swirly paint pour looking things. But it dries flat, and it is acrylic. And then let's say you wanted to make like a really thick drip, and I'll show you how to do that. So to make a thick drip, you actually use more of the acrylic medium. Again, it could be gloss medium, it can be matte medium, whatever you have, on hand. So I think I'd added some to this hot paint that I had, and so I'm just going to add some more. And so you want to you want to add, the medium is always a little bit thinner than the paint. And so this is a glaze. It's going to be a lighter glaze now, but because I added more medium to it. But it's also, I'm going to use it to make a thick drip. So I always add a little water, but if you add too much water to your paint, it's going to break down the binder, and then it won't, it may not last for a long time. So I just added a couple of spritzes of water just to thin it a little bit. Okay, so this is where it's kind of tricky. So I'm going to put some of this thick paint on where I did the glazes. Do you see how thick it is? It's got the medium in it. And then if I tilt it, a lot of this is wet, so I don't want to tilt it too much. But if I just tilted this and I kind of hit it with the table, it's going to pull this down. And you can actually get a pretty thick drip going. And it's going to dry like this. So I've done pieces before where they actually look like there's paint dripping down them, like a big, thick goop of paint. And it dries like that and it stays like that. So if you want to create a thick drip like that, you just add medium and a little bit of water to your paint, and it's going to dry super glossy. And you could lean it against the wall or whatever you want to do, and it's going to slowly start to drip. And then whenever you get it to where you want it, you just stop it and let it sit, and it will flatten out a little bit and give you like that. It'll stay nice and glossy and everything. So you can do thick drips like that. So I'm just making all kinds of a mess right now. I think I covered up that pink glaze entirely, but oh well. So you can, like I said, play around and do pretty much whatever you want on this. I just want you to, make different types of marks with your palette knives, with your brushes, and just experiment with some of the different materials that came with your paint. And then I would label them all, once that you're done, and just label them so you remember how you did it. So if you want to do that on any future projects that you definitely could. So that is the blending and texture chart. I mean the texture and brushwork chart. So try to experiment with like half of them with the brush, and then half with your palette knives and other kind of things. So did anybody have any questions? If you ever need the paint to dry so you can do something else with it, you can use a blow dryer. That will help accelerate the time. Just be careful because it always dries from the outside in. So just because it feels dry on the outside, it may still be gushy on the inside. So if you pierce it or something, it could, kind of ooze out or something. So you may be careful with it. So did you have a question in it?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry it took so long for me to get on with my login. So I came in right when you had all your paint set up for the blending. Um, is there a specific color format that we should be using, or because I'm so sorry, I missed that portion where you were laying out all the different paints.
Oh, it's okay. I'm recording it, so I'll be able to post
Okay.
it. But I had a lot of premix tubes that came in this like set that someone gave me, so it had a bunch of different values already. So I just chose to use those, so I didn't have to mix them all. So you just need at least 10 different colors,
Okay.
But you know, if you only have the ones that are like the primary colors, like we were using last week, then I would mix a bunch of different values first, so that
Okay.
they blend together. Because if you put like black and white next to each other, and then you try to blend those, there's so much value difference between them. You're not going to get like a really even blend. So you want
Okay.
to have some, like I had, you know, like these colors where they were not too far from each other in value. So as I blended them, you know, they kind of blended more smoothly than if
Together.
I had put like this black, if I had put, well, you guys, if I had put like this black here next to like this green, you know,
Hmm.
they wouldn't have blended very well together because they're so far, you know, from it. So it might have, if I wanted to blend like green to this black, I would have probably made a bunch of the different values like I showed you all last week before I blended it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it made a really good sense, especially when you mentioned how it lays across a spectrum. And so as soon as you said you mentioned the word spectrum, I'm like, okay, I get it, you know?
Yeah, I never really, I don't use a lot of the paint right out of the tube like this, and so I usually just buy like the primary colors and then mix them. But someone gave me this like big box of all these. I mean, I think it's got like 40, 60 different colors. And
Wow.
so a lot of them, it's like there's a bunch of different ranges of pink and oranges and things like that. So I just thought I would, just for time's sake, just use those so y'all didn't have to watch me mix, you know, all of those. But I was saying if you have any colors left over from the color exercises, you
Mhm.
can use those too, you know, if
Okay,
you
cool.
have
Mhm.
those.
Okay. All right. Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So the blending and the blending and this experimental texture one, they always go a lot faster because people you know, get into it more, just kind of playing around. And so anyway, have fun with you know with these things, and I would go ahead and try to. We were scheduled to be working on these all these starts next week too, but as I was looking at the schedule for the rest of the semester, I think it would be good if for painting one, we could go ahead and begin like your first actual painting assignments on Wednesday. So you have a little bit more time to work on them. And because you know that's one of the hardest things with doing this online is you know, I know how I could push people in class when we were face to face, but with it being online, you know, I don't know. In some of my classes, I've found some students aren't really doing assignments at all, and I'm like, that's not going to work. And then they're asking about making things up, and I'm like, no, we got to keep moving, you know, forward. So I would rather us get a little ahead right now, so that you guys can have more time for your actual paintings as we get closer to midterm. All right. So, is there anything else anybody wanted me to show you, or are there any other techniques or anything you had questions about?
Can I show you a painting real quick from last week just to see if I'm on the right track? Is that possible, or do I wait after
Yeah.
class?
No, no, no. Go for it.